Hi, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today. I'm Jessica Espinoza. I'm the CEO of the 2X Collaborative, which is a global industry body for gender lens investing that's convening the whole spectrum of investors to move more capital towards gender equality and women's empowerment. So let me kick off with 3 stats that keep me up at night. Only 2% of venture capital goes to women-led startups. Only 8% of senior positions in venture capital and private equity firms are held by women. And according to the World Economic Forum, at the current rate of progress, it will still take 268 years to close the global economic gender gap. Now let's turn to 4 stats that should keep investors up at night. If you look at entrepreneurship, those companies founded by women that do get funded deliver twice as much revenue per dollar invested. When we look at leadership, gender balanced leadership teams in private equity generate a 20% higher net IRR. In employment, we know from McKinsey that closing the gender gap in the labor force would boost global GDP by $28 trillion by 2025. That is per year. And that's more than the economies of the US and China combined, which is why the women's market is often referred to as the largest emerging market. And then products and services. Women already control 40 trillion of global consumer spending. And so there's a strong case of designing products and services with a gender lens to make sure that they meet women's needs. So our 2X journey started at the G7 summit in 2018, and it was originally a joint commitment by the development finance institutions of the G7 countries to look at their core business and to make sure that collectively we invest in women and thereby invest in the world. And so we gave ourselves the challenge to allocate at least $3 billion with a gender lens towards private sector investments in emerging markets that benefit women. And at the time, it really felt like a challenge. So $3 billion, through your core business and meaningfully impacting women was seen as quite ambitious. So let's take a look at how we actually did. In the next slide, you can see the capital that we actually allocated. And you can see that we surpassed our initial target by more than 3 times. So we collectively mobilized and raised 11.4 billion in less than 3 years. And you can see here how that is distributed. So 6.9 billion were collectively invested by the DFIs themselves. And the rest of it was mobilized through co-investments from private and public sector co-investors, then reaching 11.4 billion. And so at the last summit in 2021, we gave ourselves the next target, which is a collective target of at least 15 billion. And that is in just 2 years, so by the end of this year. You can also see on the right-hand side how our membership has grown very quickly. So what initially started as a commitment by the G7 DFIs quickly brought on board other types of development finance institutions from all around the world. And then in 2021, we expanded our membership to the multilateral development banks as well. So you can see here, for example, IFC, EBRD, ADB, and EIB, the European Investment Bank, had already joined us a year earlier. So in addition to those founding members, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on, but we've seen a lot of co-investment opportunities and potential, as you can see here. So we've also crowded in and mobilized other types of investors to join us in gender lens investing. We've since been creating really a global industry standard for gender lens investing. So if you wonder what are the criteria according to which we allocated these 11.4 billion, we developed the 2X criteria as a new investment framework that would guide public and private sector investors to meaningfully allocate capital towards gender equality and women's economic empowerment. And so we look at entrepreneurship. Here you can see our 5 criteria. So women's entrepreneurship, that's business ownership and companies founded by women. Then leadership, so women's representation in senior management and the board, or if we're talking about investment firms, on the investment committee. The third one focuses on quality employment, so women's participation in the labor force, but not only the share of women among employees, but also quality indicators and workplace policies and practices that promote women's economic empowerment and women's career advancement. So you can think of equal pay and all other kinds of policies and initiatives. Then the fourth one, consumption, focuses on gender smart product design, so products and services that positively impact on women's and girls' economic empowerment. And then the fifth criterion looks at investments through financial intermediaries. So as allocators, we often invest through financial institutions that then on lend to SMEs, for example, or through private equity and venture capital funds that in turn invest into companies. And so when we make these investments, we look at the criteria 1 to 4, both at the level of the financial intermediary itself, so the institution itself, as well as at the portfolio level. This is just a simple snapshot of what the criteria look like. Under each of these, there are harmonized indicators that have been mainstreamed into existing ESG and impact frameworks. And so there are commonly shared indicators that are today the industry standard for gender lens investing under each of these criteria. In addition to that, we've put out a number of knowledge products and thought leadership pieces. And so, for example, we launched this Fund Manager's Guide to Gender Smart Investing, focusing specifically on private equity and venture capital. We also recently co-created and then launched a Gender Smart Climate Finance Toolkit that was presented at COP26, the World Climate Summit, a couple of months ago. And this Gender Smart Climate Toolkit is, for example, published on our website and really helps investors understand how they can incorporate a meaningful gender lens into their climate finance investments. And so these are just a few examples, but that has really been driving the market and has also made our success possible of shifting capital at scale and in just a few years, really. I mentioned that we've seen a lot of co-investment opportunities. And so since the success of the 2X Challenge, and especially in the COVID year 2020, when we were able to really grow the 2X capital pool significantly, despite all the odds of the pandemic, we reached a lot of momentum and also attracted the whole range of other types of investors. So pension funds, family offices, other types of allocators, asset owners, asset managers, as well as financial institutions and private equity and venture capital funds themselves. And they were keen to join the 2X Collaborative or become more formal partners. And so we saw a significant demand in the market to launch a global industry body for gender lens investing. That's a standalone entity and is able to scale very quickly. And so at the Generation Equality Forum last year, we launched the 2X Collaborative in partnership with Gender Smart and ILN, the Investor Leadership Network, as a global industry body that's now convening the full spectrum of capital providers and mobilizers across emerging markets, but also developed markets. And you can basically envision it as a structured network of different types of investors that are convening around investment interest, asset classes, sectors, thematic interests such as gender and climate or care economy, other types of themes, value chain finance, for example. And the key benefits kind of this one-stop shop is to have a unique platform for deal pipeline, for peer learning, shared tools, shared thought leadership, and moving action, both in terms of scaling the volume of capital that's flowing towards gender equality and women's empowerment, but also deepening the impact and really maintaining high credibility of this field. Here you can see our early members that were part of the announcement. The 2X Collaborative formally started operations as a full-fledged entity on the 1st of January this year. And so our membership has been growing quite quickly. And you can see our collaborating partners. There's a lot of momentum in the market. And so we're currently welcoming other capital providers to join us. Let me zoom into a little bit of the success of what we've achieved so far, and also of some of the persistent gaps or opportunities going forward. So here you can see one example of how 2X has really helped mainstream the gender lens among well-established private equity funds. We launched the 2X flagship fund strategy. That was, I think, in 2020. So it was during the 2X challenge, the first 2X challenge. And the 2X flagship fund strategy awards a special status, a 2X flagship fund status, by an elected committee that vets funds based on a credible commitment to gender diversity, both at the fund manager level, as well as in the investment strategy and the portfolio level. And the first one, the first fund internationally that got this special award is DPI, Development Partners International, one of the largest fund managers in Africa. And for their new fund that they raised, they were awarded 2X flagship fund status based on a very credible commitment. And since then, now we have around 10 private equity funds worldwide that have received that special recognition. So we've seen significant momentum and growing interest of really transforming previously gender blind mainstream funds to now adopt the gender lens and become gender smart. However, on the other hand, we do still see persistent gaps and biases and barriers when it comes to female-led diverse fund managers that are now increasingly coming to market with exactly the type of investment strategies and approaches that the 2X challenge is promoting. However, they're facing significant barriers and have not been able to attract significant institutional investments because they are often perceived or are actually emerging of first-time fund managers without the well-established track record that the firms that have always been around have established over the last years. And so what we see is that this gender bias that everybody talks about, so gender bias in capital allocation from private equity, venture capital, and debt funds to entrepreneurs, to underrepresented entrepreneurs, is perpetuated by gender bias and other bias from institutional investors in their capital allocation to fund managers. And if we can collectively solve that problem, we see a significant opportunity to unleash these ripple effects of gender lens investing. So capital for gender smart fund managers with gender balanced team can unlock significant capital for underrepresented founders and gender smart businesses at scale. So to tackle these challenges, we convened a design sprint that was really groundbreaking. It had over 120 investment professionals from across all markets. So we had pioneer GLI fund managers, we had LP investors, so institutional investors that invest in funds, we had regional private equity and venture capital associations and networks, and they all came together to jointly co-create a solution that could solve this big market failure and this big challenge that we see. The design sprint concluded that the smartest way to unlock gender smart capital at scale is to invest in female-led or gender-balanced fund managers with gender lens investing strategies. Here you can see some of the people who participated in the design sprint, and you can see the outcome 2X Ignite. So 2X Ignite is a holistic market-building solution to unlock gender smart capital by accelerating 100 gender smart fund managers, reaching over 1,000 gender smart businesses across all emerging markets over the coming years. It's a blended facility, as you can see here, which combines capacity building and shared services with working capital and warehousing, and then the connection to LP and investors in our network and beyond, to provide them with this investable pipeline of GLI funds that have gone through 2X Ignite as a catalytic facility. Here's the ambition: 5 regions, 100 fund managers, 1,000 gender smart enterprises. And we're now moving from design phase to implementation, and very much welcome you to join us in this bold endeavor. We're always looking for partners, and would also be excited to see this eventually go to developed markets as well, since there's also such a big need there. I think I'm at the end of my time. It's really been a pleasure being here. I look forward to connecting with all of you throughout this conference. And please also feel free to reach out anytime. Very much looking forward to continuing the conversation and excited for the next session. Thank you so much, everybody.